And that's kind of what I thought about. And when I presented it to people, someone's like, very interesting take, because again, Deion's got so many healthy relationships with people who run these clubs.
Hey team, welcome back to the First and Tuna podcast. I'm your host Tuna, where normally we do cover focusing on Rams related content and the NFL. But today we have a special guest. We have been blessed by the sports media gods themselves. Our co-host today is none other than NFL Network's chief national reporter, Steve Wyche. Now, when it comes to big dogs, that's the biggest dog on the biggest porch in broadcast and journalism in the football world. Now, this is the person, in my belief, that if you're going to aspire to be in this line of work of sports media, he is the standard that you should strive to follow. Before you dive into this episode, I'd like to tell you that, yes, we do cover some current NFL topics. Shadeur Sanders in the draft, his draft stock, the Raiders organization, briefly on the Rams themselves too. But if you are not new to this channel or you know me personally, you know that I love talking about bigger issues, societal issues. We focus today mostly on his perspectives on like the Colin Kaepernick protest and his reporting on it, black representation in sports media, and a lot of HBCUs getting up to the even playing field with Power 4 programs. If you find yourself loving our content and want to support, check this out. Shameless plug. We got hats back in. Check out the website. It's in the description below. That is where you are going to find all of our articles, anything up to date in the First and Tuna world. And the shop is there. Get a hat. I love wearing them, except for today because it just didn't match the vibe. But without further ado, I'd like to thank everybody for the support. And last but not least, obviously, thank you to Steve Wyche for his time on the show. Without further ado, let's dive into our conversation with Steve Wyche. We are live here in Los Angeles, both myself and my guest. As I just told him off camera, I'm a little nervous. Like, I'm hoping not to embarrass myself in front of a true professional at this craft in sports media. Today we have Steve Wyche. This man is the chief national reporter for NFL Network, NFL.com. I don't know what else you can say about this man. Anything that comes across the NFL desk that is important, especially in the HBCU world, which we're going to talk about at length today, you have Steve Wyche to thank for it. How you doing today, Steve?
I'm great, Pierce, man. I'm honored. I'm so glad you reached out, man. I'm looking forward to this. We're going to have a good time.
I appreciate it. And we'll ease into it. We'll do some current stuff. I don't want to take away from any breaking news or anything like that, because everyone's coming to my channel for that. But to get you warmed up, let's talk some current NFL stuff that's going on. I know a lot of people are worried, concerned, have their opinions on Shadeur Sanders and his whole draft stock. In my opinion, it was a really, really weird, to say the least, with big air quotes, to see a draft stock tank as much as that. What are your thoughts on Shadeur Sanders getting drafted to the Browns in that whole process?
It's weird. I think in the media we say he tanked. I think in NFL circles there are people who feel he probably got drafted where they felt he should. Now, the weird part to me is for 2 years, it's been 2 years, we have heard, at least on broadcast or reports, that Shadeur Sanders is one of the best quarterbacks in the NCAA. But again, that might be the media saying things. But again, I trust so many people in the business that I do that they're hearing it from NFL teams. They're not hearing it. They're not just making this stuff up. There is a lot of parroting that goes on with the media. Well, this media outlet said it, so I'm going to say it, blah, 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 blah. Okay, there's that domino. But again, you hear this from some teams. And it's so – I thought about this after the fact, Pierce, and knowing Deion well. Remember, I used to work with Deion. I love them. We've done a lot of things. You have a friendship. I would consider it a friendship. A lot of people are like, Shadeur's getting punished for the way Deion handled things. I wonder if it's the opposite. I think Deion has so many healthy relationships with people in the league, in the front office, with coaches. Some of these guys are former teammates, people that he's dealt with, that maybe they didn't want to tell him along the way, hey, look, we don't value Shadeur maybe the way you think you value him since he's your son. Like our opinion of him is different, but they couldn't tell him that because of these healthy relationships that he has. Again, I'm speculating. I don't know this, but Dion is such a wonderful guy. Like, the guy doesn't have a mean bone in his body and things like this. And again, he's had 30 years since he's last played, since he's to develop the relationships. Well, these are people running teams now. These are people evaluating players now. And so maybe these guys just weren't up front with him. I don't know. But it's just so odd that a player that was so publicly heralded as being so good all of a sudden gets drafted in the 5th round. Again, some people think, oh, it's the way Dion handled him and the way the kid behaved. Well, maybe there's a little different spin on that. That's real, and that's kind of what I thought about. And when I presented it to people, someone's like, "Very interesting take," because again, Dion's got so many healthy relationships with people who run these clubs.
That is, I absolutely have not heard that take at all before. And the reason why I'm immediately gravitated towards finding some validity in that is a lot of the casual fans, even a lot of self-proclaimed football internet nerds like myself. We forget about the relationship aspect of not just transactions, but the draft, or all transactions. Why a free agent goes here or there. A lot of it is based on, hey, I remember this guy from 5 years ago. And with somebody as big as an impact as Dion, as Primetime, it's really hard for me to think that the media had that much of an impact on someone going from the 1st round to the 5th round. The most confusing part for me, and I'm not close enough to the Browns organization to know what their draft history is like, is them taking Dylan Gabriel.
Yeah,
A little before that, it was a little weird to me. I know that obviously the Deshaun Watson stuff has a lot probably to play in it. They just want to not miss on quarterback at any level, whether it's 1st, 2nd, 3rd, reserve. I just thought that was interesting as well. But thanks for giving us some food for thought. I had not heard about that whatsoever.
It's weird. I want to jump on that point with the Browns because drafting Shadeur, I know people say, well, it's a 5th round pick. It's a low risk, this or that. Hey, man, the Browns do not have room for a luxury pick. And they may think, okay, well, let's get 2 quarterbacks in here and figure it out. Well, the guy you traded for, Kenny Pickett's there, and Joe Flacco, who you signed, is there. Teams don't carry 4. Somebody's getting cut or somebody's being stashed on a practice squad. And quarterbacks don't get stashed on practice squads. That's a rare thing that you see. It's usually DBs, linebackers, guys who can come in and play special teams. Right? So I was perplexed by that. If you like Shadeur, just take him in the 3rd. If you like Dylan Gabriel, pass on Shadeur. It's just a weird, strange. You're not drafting luxury picks at that position, and you're the Browns, right? You've got DB. You've got to add to your secondary. You've got to add to your inside linebacker core. You've got to get younger along your offensive line. You can find contributors in the 5th round at those positions. To draft a quarterback who might not make your roster in the 5th round, to me, was like, I did not get that whatsoever.
Yeah, it makes me feel better that I'm just as perplexed as you. It makes me feel a little bit more as a professional. They're like, hey, we don't always have the answers, but I am curious to see how it shakes out. I just want the Cleveland fans to not have to be in misery for much too longer. Hopefully they get their quarterback of the future.
They're such good fans, man. They're so loyal, man. They're better. They're better than me, man.
Well, we'll speak to Midwest fandom a little bit in your background here, but to kind of wrap up the modern stuff, another team that is looking to make a culture shift, a dynamic big swing, the Raiders. They're swinging big with Coach Carroll. Everyone loves him. He's definitely a player coach. Do you think the new blood at the coaching level, the insertion of Tom Brady at the ownership level, the draft that they just had, bringing in Geno Smith, do you think that's enough to see an immediate shift in their fortunes, or is there a big ownership dynamic that is going to hold down a winning culture there? Because they've had a tough history the last 10, 15 years as well.
Yeah. There's some institutional issues. We'll leave it at that. I mean, the Just Win Baby, the commitment to excellence. I mean, there's still a lot of people in that building who are hanging on to the way things used to be run. But Mark Davis has made some changes in terms of bringing in Sandra Douglas Morgan to be the team president. Mark is aware enough to bring in some outside eyes, and that's why the hiring of Pete Carroll and John Spytek were some of my favorite moves any team made, personnel wise, player wise, anything this offseason. Just because Pete's one, he brings a different energy, right? Some of the energy, the Antonio Pierce energy is a former player, but how long is that going to sustain, right? And they played hard for AP. They just didn't have players, right? The Josh McDaniel stuff, he was tough on his coaches and just kind of wore everybody out. Pete's not that guy, right? And then Spytek is coming from Tampa Bay, where he's kind of aligned with Pete ideologically. Let's build a team through the lines of scrimmage. Let's have a physical football team. Let's have a quarterback who is capable, may not be the greatest quarterback, but is beyond capable of winning football games. Then let's build competition. You look how they drafted. They've got healthy players coming back, veterans back, guys like Christian Wilkins and Kuntz, who are hell of a players who were hurt last year, right? Mm-hmm. And they get these guys back, and now you get some competition where these practices are different than they've been run. Instead of drudgery, they're like, okay, let's go get it. I think that mindset is I think the Raiders are a team where we can see improvement out of the gate. Now, they just happen to play in a division that's a monster, because the Denver Broncos, to me, had one of the best drafts of any team.
I love
it. They've got their quarterback, right? The Chiefs are there. The Chargers are going nowhere. They're going to be good. So in terms of wins and losses, we may not see, the Raiders go up to double-digit wins, but we might. That's the thing. I really think the mindset could change there. I really think some of the institutional things, when I say institutional, again, people hanging on to what happened 40 years ago like it was yesterday. I think some of that stuff could continue to shift.
Yeah, I love the Ashton Genty pick. I feel is a far cry from them picking up on players like Darius Hayward-Bay in the first round. Like just seeing 4.2 speed and falling in love with it. Those days seem to have with Spytek. I feel like definitely an improvement there. I'd be remiss not to just ask real quick. You mentioned the Chargers. They're here in Los Angeles. They pay rent to our favorite team here on the podcast, the Rams. You got the Rams winning the Super Bowl this year, right?
I think I think they're going to be in the mix. I'm not counting them out.
Did you? I obviously didn't want to dive too deep and be creepy in your personal history, but seeing that you grew up kind of in the Midwest, I think you'd mentioned before, a little between Minnesota and St. Louis. Is that correct?
Yeah, went to high school and everything in St. Louis.
So did you grow up like a Vikings fan, a Rams fan? Were you?
The Rams weren't there when I lived there. The Rams weren't there.
Okay.
I grew up in the 70s, and the Vikings were going to the Super Bowls and losing them. Right, Carl Eller, the Hall of Fame defensive end, he lived like 10 houses away from me. We used to go trick or treating in his house, so I loved the Vikings. They were just like everything. That's why everything in Minnesota is purple. Don't be fooled by Prince. That's all because of the Vikings. But when I moved to St. Louis, the St. Louis football Cardinals were there. Back with Jim Hart and Mel Gray and Terry Metcalf and Dan Deerdorf and Conrad Dobler and Roger Worley. Those guys were still there. And then they left, moved to Arizona. Then there was a void. There were 6 or 7 years where there was no team there before the Rams moved in. So, yeah, no, I was a Vikings fan all through that. I had nothing was going to sway me. I did become a St. Louis baseball Cardinals fan. I still am to this day, because they've been to 7 World Series in my lifetime. So I've been treated well when it comes to that.
Oh, that's hard to miss. That's like a super random anecdote, but us being a West Coast guy, Rams fan, I am oddly enough a Celtics fan. And because of Jason Tatum and him growing up in St. Louis, he's obviously a big proponent of the Cardinals. So by proxy, I like seeing the Cardinals do well because that means Tatum's going to be around. So I like rooting for my favorite players' team as well.
You can't walk these streets in a Celtic jersey, though, man. You can't do that in L.A. That's not safe, bro.
You know what's interesting is I've gotten healthy banter. Like even when I'm in East LA, like just grabbing tacos or something, like I'll get healthy banter. But Lakers fans are not super confrontational, and it's been a lot of fun. I'll just say that. No threats. So we're good so far.
All right.
There's during your time though, so you growing up a Vikings fan, during your career, have you felt a shift in biases? Like have you started rooting for other teams? Do you still have a man cave of just pure purple, or maybe towards players in general?
No, I mean, look, I grew up when I was young, right? When there's Fran Tarkenton, Chuck Foreman, my second favorite player of all time, 44, to me the most unheralded, great player, not recognized because his career was cut short by injuries.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, once I got to a point of covering sports, and I started covering pro sports, it's not, hey, you have to be objective. It's just like I lost all interest in rooting for particular teams because players and coaches change teams so much. Right? When I was coming up, Fran Tarkenton, he started with the Giants, but he played for the Vikings. Alan Page spent most of his career with the Vikings. Carl Eller, Chuck Foreman, Bud Grant, they were all, and then they aged out. But it wasn't like today where guys every 2 or 3 years, they're ping-ponging all over, and that's in every sport. And so I lost the allegiances. I think, you see more in the media people waving their fan flagdom with media members and things like that. And I think it's actually kind of healthy as long as they identify it and they're not giving favorable coverage to a team or this and that. But it's interesting because you kind of find yourself doing what I do. I won't say rooting for, but liking to work with teams that are easier to work with. And that's in any profession. Like if you're dealing with a team where you just know going in, it's pulling teeth, it's chewing glass to get them to operate with you. It's like, geez, I have to do it, but I'd rather deal with this team. Like the Rams are incredible to work with. Like they get the media aspect of it. They make people available. From top down, from Stan Kroenke to Sean McVay to Leslie, they're all very amicable and amiable when you see them. It's not like there's this great iron sphere around them like there is with some clubs. So when you're working with teams like that, it's easier going to work that day. Okay, I got to cover the Rams. Great, I know they're going to be easy. Versus versus covering certain teams, where it's like, oh, I know it can be combative at any minute. Let's try our best here, but who knows how this is going to go today.
I won't. I won't make you name names, but I can. In my head, I'm already have a head canon of some teams possibly like that, and I can respect the not wanting to have biases in your reporting. Like for me, that deals with quarterbacks above Rams, above even football. Like, I just love pure great quarterback play, and my pet peeve is terrible quarterback play or bad coaching towards developing quarterbacks. Like I'm a big proponent for Brock Purdy. Like I love how he plays. I love his development, his story, even as a rival for my favorite team. I think he's severely underrated, so I can appreciate that as well. I want to sort of transition into a little bit deeper like conversations of society and like just journalism, sports media in general. You, based on your history going to Howard University, I know you've seen so many transitions over the decades in your field. There are a lot of opportunity for growth to pull people of color along into more positions in sports media. And you've kind of touched on this in other conversations as well, of not just a former athlete giving his opinion and not just a female reporter on the sidelines. What can we do in today's sports media to create a path for mentorship to help fill the void in some of these spaces that people of color typically are not seen prominently?
It's a broad paintbrush, but I get the question. Look, a lot of it is up to people like me, who are in there. The few people who are trained journalists, to make sure we reach out. We make sure to do, like, there's a lot of smaller, minority media companies. Hey, can you come on my podcast? Absolutely. I'm not too big, so to speak, to not help you, to try to give you exposure, for you to call me. Like I work with a lot of college students. I do some stuff for HBCU Go, and I make sure when I'm on those campuses to embrace it. But I mean, there's not many like trained black journalists. I mean, that's kind of like, you could turn on ESPN or NFL Network sometimes, see a set of all black people, but very few of them are trained journalists, usually former athletes. And we've got to make sure those of us who are in positions to make ourselves available, because I didn't get to where I am without David Aldridge, without Brian Burwell, who used to cover the Rams, in St. Louis, without Michael Wilbon. Those people made sure when they spoke of up and comers that my name was mentioned, right? They took care of me. And so we always have to remember that. The other part is, the people calling the shots, man, like they just don't look like me. I've said this many times. I've been in the professional workforce since 1989. I have never, ever had a black department head. Ever. Ever. And that's, when we talk about where I work now, we're nowhere close to that. And so, when you've got people who look like me or who are non-white making decisions, they can at least consider or be cognizant of, hey, look, we don't have enough women actually doing this, or we don't have enough Polynesians or indigenous people in positions like this. And so let me at least bring these people onto the spectrum of potential job candidates. Like, they may not be the best ones, right? If they're not up to the task, I don't want to hire them because it makes me look bad, right? But at least bring them into the conversation so they have an opportunity to prove themselves, whether it's in the interview room or whether it's actually doing the job. And that's, that's a real struggle today, because with media companies becoming more conglomerates and then streamlining smaller and smaller, there are fewer and fewer opportunities for everybody of every ethnicity. And then there are fewer people making the decisions who are championing diversity. People wish DEI was now DIE, and trying to get that completely out of the conversation. And it's a very intriguing time that we're in. Whereas before, some people might bow their necks and say, we're plowing forward with this. They're kind of like, I'm going to bend the knee a little bit and see where this goes.
It's a prominent conversation, not just in sports media. You touched on DEI. It's across all of all the working class, no matter what your profession is. And I just think it's even more so important in sports media, because who are we talking about? Whatever percentage of athletes in all sports are black athletes. And I've seen you in other conversations talk about it's interesting when you walk into like a team's media room and there's zero representation of what the players look like. And for a lot of people who have not grown up in, very diverse neighborhoods, like, even myself, I've been benefited of that you don't understand. Like, that's important to see someone that looks like you representing you at every level, whether it's agency, media. So I implore anyone that's watching this that is unfamiliar with why something like that's important, do a little bit more reading, a little bit more research, check up on Steve's other conversations on other podcasts as well. In your time, though, you have been a part of some incredible things that have turned into not just one story, but have turned into cultural shifts, societal shifts. The Colin Kaepernick, I almost want to say incident, because when he took the knee, when he started taking a knee for the national anthem, very divisive.
It was his protest. It wasn't an incident. It was his protest.
Sorry, I meant the instance when he first did it and you reported on it. Yeah. But yeah, his protest, that you were the one who initially broke it, noticed that he did it. Did you immediately understand kind of the weight of the situation and foresee at all how big this would become, and how far people ran away with it, away from what his purpose, intent of the protest was at all?
Yeah, I knew it was going to be big just because, I used to cover the NBA. And I remember when Mahmoud Abdul-Rauf, formerly Chris Jackson, did this in the NBA when he was with the Denver Nuggets, who weren't a great team, who were kind of in a smaller market. And, he got suspended by the league because the league had a policy in place that said you had to stand and honor the flag during the playing of the national anthem. And he would kind of not look down and get into a certain pose. And it was like, that was in like 96, I think, around there. And it was like, whoa, how dare he, right? And it was not a starting quarterback who had played in the Super Bowl, who at the time, people forget, Colin Kaepernick was one one of the most famous NFL players in the league. He's on the cover of every
Mm-hmm.
magazine, fashion magazine, societal magazines. So I knew it was going to be big. I mean, Cap and I talked about this. After we did the interview, I was like, Cap, this is going to be a big story. And he got it. I got it, but for it to have the legs that it has, I won't say it's surprising, but just the fact that it's such a huge cultural reference point. That's why I say you cannot write American history anymore without mentioning Colin Kaepernick, because people will say, okay, there's a George Floyd juxtaposition of the police officer killing a man, George Floyd kneeling down, and then Colin Kaepernick kneeling down in a peaceful protest against police brutality. And so knew it was going to be big, did not probably fully understand the global magnitude of it, and the fact that Cap would kind of, after he did it, once he was out of the league, he's kind of just kept to himself. He's done his own affairs and all the great things that he's doing kind of in his own vacuum, while other people have kind of picked up the mantle. So it's an interesting evolution. We're almost 10 years out. It'll be 10 years in 26. And the fact that we're still talking about it, I tell people, as a journalist, it made me braver. If a 28-year-old dude is going to sacrifice his career to prove a point, well, I can't be as chicken or as conforming and conformist as I once was. So that's why I think when it's appropriate, I raise my hand and raise my voice as well.
And we're definitely going to talk about that, about being, I feel like using the word outspoken almost has a negative connotation, because it talks about going against some sort of whatever's concurrent. But how is Cap doing? And I'm not sure the last time you've spoken to him, but I can imagine you kind of have to do a lot of your current dealings in private. Otherwise, your past kind of takes away from the importance of whatever you're doing today, unfortunately.
Yeah, I haven't spoken to Cap in probably a year or so, but he was at the Met Gala, so I guess he's doing well. He was there with his wife.
I didn't see that.
They have a son now, so I guess he's doing well. But he does his clinics, he does his your Know Your Rights camps, where he's educating people of all cultures and all races about their rights. Hey, if you get pulled over, if this happens, these are your rights. You don't have to do this. Make sure you do that. So it's very grassroots, and that's where his heart is. I mean, when he first did this, you go back and look at my original story. He's like, I'm not doing this for anybody else. I'm not asking my teammates or anyone else in the league to do this. This is just my personal belief. I can't sit here and not do nothing when we're watching the evening news night after night, seeing unarmed people of color getting shot by police and police getting paid leave while other families are suffering. And so, again, he didn't ask for everything that came. I think he didn't knowingly ask for it.
Yeah.
But we all know in this country, in any country, if you tread on that nation's flag, there's going to be repercussions.
Yeah, I have a lot of respect for what Colin Kaepernick did. Essentially, by way of how other ownership, how the locker rooms, whatever their individual team's reasoning being, essentially his NFL career ended after his time in San Francisco because of his decision to protest. And I can't think of a greater individual in sports realm to have protested like that successfully. And we're talking about it today, and we will be talking about it 10 years from now as well. I can guarantee that. Kind of going along with your own worldview and kind of how you've grown into sports media. Shout out to Howard University. How did your decision to go to Howard shape your current worldview? And then do you take responsibility for one of your I'm not sure if you guys were in the same class together, but Gus Johnson, my absolute favorite commentator. Do you take credit for his unique voice and his excitement when he's calling games?
No, Gus is 2 years behind me at Howard. I remember Gus, like Stan Verrett, who's the LA Sports Center. We graduated together at Howard, and Gus was 2 years behind us. And Gus was a grinder, man. You knew back then, like, here's this young kid from Detroit, man, who was in our pocket. Like, I was a print guy. Stan was doing like radio. Like he was doing overnight radio while he was a student at Howard. But we had this incredible journalism department Michelle Miller, who's on CBS News, the morning show, she was with us. A ton of print journalists. We had this unbelievable Frederica Whitfield,
Oh
who
my
is
God.
on CNN.
Sports media, you.
We were all together, man. She was like she was like a year ahead of me and Stan, or maybe 2 years ahead of me and Stan. We were all in a cluster. So we had this great group of professors who like recognized, okay, we got people here. Like on Sundays, we were in the journalism building. I was putting a newspaper together. Like I said, Stan was doing overnights. Michelle was doing all this other stuff. Like they recognized they had this group of students. So they would literally take us individually over to USA Today. They would take us to the Washington Post. Like I came up. One of the reasons why I had a job waiting for me when I graduated is I spent a year at the Washington Post because one of my professors put me on to cover high school, recommended me to cover high school football and basketball games to the Post when they needed college students to do it. And I was good, and they kept me on. And then 9 years later, the Post brings me back to cover the NBA during the whole Michael Jordan comeback. So the experience there for me was different because like a lot of students at Howard, I transferred in. I went to University of Missouri for 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So I have a basis of comparison from going to a major state university that everyone seems to want to go to. I want to go to Ohio State. I want to go to Penn State. I want to go to UCLA, University of Texas. And then I get there and it's like, okay, this isn't everything I had hoped it was going to be. Especially because, I was on the football team. That didn't go well. Coaching change, all that other stuff. I wasn't very good. So I was going to go transfer. My mother, both my parents went to Hampton Institute, which is now Hampton University, hence the real HU battles between Howard and Hampton. But like my mother was always like, well, how come you don't, when I was getting recruited, I'm getting letters from Missouri and Kansas State and Michigan State and all these Midwestern universities, some directional schools, Southwest Missouri State, which is now Missouri. How come what about Grambling? What about Southern? What about Hampton? I was like, I haven't received one letter from them. So I don't know if they like me. But then after, I grew up in the suburbs, well outside of St. Louis. I was we were one of a handful of families of color in our town. Back then it was kind of the last line of civilization before it got very rural. So I've been through a lot of the stuff, you hear about and read about in books. But it was like, one of my buddies, a black kid on the team at high school, was like, we should transfer to a black college. We would go there, we'd live and experience something we've never experienced. We could play football, we could be good. Well, I applied, called up some coaches like, hey, I'm coming through. He didn't. And so I ended up going, and Willie Jeffries, who was the head coach at Howard, had actually sent me some recruiting letters when he was at Wichita State. He was the first black coach of Division 1A program. So he knew who I was and was excited when I told him I was coming. But transfer rules were different back then. One, for me to get into Howard, I couldn't leave after my fall semester of being at University of Missouri. I had to go another semester. I was no longer on the football team, but I had to complete 4 semesters there. So that's a semester without football after redshirting. And then I would have to sit out a year. Even though I was going down a level, I would have to sit out a year. So that would be like basically two plus years of not playing. So I lost my stinger. And, it's a good thing because I went to Howard and immediately, I changed my mindset. I'd never been to DC, never been around this many black people. My grades at Missouri weren't very good. I was probably doing too much partying as opposed to studying. I didn't know how to study. Look, when we're 18, we don't know how to study when we go to college.
Yeah.
My first year, you have to learn how to do it. And so got to Howard, realized the level of student accountability and competition. You get Stan, Michelle, Frederica, Gus, because Gus was there. I was a transfer student. It's like, wow, okay, I got to step my game up. And it really got me here in a lane. So I always tell people, other than marrying my wife, man, deciding to go to Howard University was the best decision I ever made.
That's incredible. I love hearing stories like that. How part of that process, I think you'd mentioned, I want to make sure I heard you properly. Was UOP on your list of potentials to go transfer out of Missouri?
Yes.
University of Pacific in California, is that what we're talking about? Man, how close we were to having that Stockton connection because I'm born and raised in Stockton,
How
California,
about that?
and I heard that I was like, Steve, what could have been?
University of the Pacific. I was like, I want to go to California because my father went to USC. Even though I was born
Okay.
and everything in Minneapolis, he'd gone to SC, so I grew up just like, Lynn Swan, Pat Hayden, OJ, Ricky Bell, Charles White. Like I was the biggest SC fan, and when I got a letter when I was getting recruited from SC, I was like, oh, but I just wasn't good enough. And so UOP, I received some letters, was like, oh man, I want to go to California, not realizing like Stockton was up here and very far from LA.
Yeah,
But no, I went.
it's a drive, and yeah, I think you dodged a bullet not going to Stockton. I love my hometown, but dodged a few bullets, literally and figuratively, from my hometown. I was one of the before they tore down the football stadium. I was one of the last few years where they held one of the high school like all-star games for the area at that old stadium. So just thought it was an interesting anecdote. Um, you mentioned not getting recruiting letters from HBCUs. Let's quickly jump into the HBCU conversation
Sure.
before I take your entire morning, which I promise not to do. Um, that goes into lack of recruiting budget. Like
Mm-hmm.
people don't realize, like, oh hey, how come they don't recruit more? It's like, well, when you only have so many amount of coaches, less staff than like let's say an Ohio State, national champion. The staff itself is smaller. Their time is so allocated. Like if you are about my age and you guys are playing NCAA football, you get that time allocation. Like you get even
Right.
less as an HBCU. Um, what improvements have you seen, like either by the NFL, individuals for opportunities helping HBCU players and coaches for a direct path to the NFL at all?
Wow. Okay. So
I know,
again, a
big,
broad,
broad
broad,
question.
broad
Trying
question
to,
right here. Look, the recruiting budget still hasn't changed much. What's helped some of these HBCUs is social media, right? These coaches can get on Instagram, they can get on Twitter, and make
Mhm.
themselves available. You can sell your university a certain way. Some schools are good at it. Some schools are terrible at it, right? Like Howard University is a brand. Like people who don't even know about HBCUs have heard of Howard, be it from Kamala Harris, be it from so many of us bragging about Howard University. We are a national brand. We got brand Jordan. We got the logo wherever.
Mhm.
People really haven't heard of St. Paul's or Livingstone, right, or Virginia Union, unless you kind of grow up in that environment. And so the lack of budget, again, is appeased in terms of recruiting by being able to DM students or things like that, if they have time to do that. Um, a lot of it is smaller thinking. Like Dion, one thing Dion said is, we went for Travis Hunter because we tried. Like a lot of black schools say, okay, we can't get this blue chipper, so we're not even going to try. So a lot of it is the mentality. But again, the recruiting budget for a lot of these schools is smaller than what some of these second tier kids are getting in NIL money. Right. I follow a lot of these guys on social media and they're like, hey, I am in Maryland recruiting today. High school coaches, let me know if I can swing by. You think Nick Saban had to do that? No. I mean, it's so you have that part to get students there. Now, if a student goes there and he excels or she excels in her sport, what happens? You got the transfer portal now. Giovanni Gibson was a leading receiver at Arkansas Pine Bluff in the SWAC. He's out. He's at Oklahoma now. He's probably getting paid more than, he's probably getting 6-7 figures in NIL money. So it's hard for these HBCUs to get guys all the way through. Now, what they can do is get guys, let's say University of Florida, who get injured or get kicked off the team or have an academic issue. A lot of those students can transfer down. And that's what happens sometimes as well. Transfer portal is benefiting HBCUs in that regard. So that's where they're getting some talent that eventually might get to the NFL. In terms of what the NFL does to create exposure with the help of people like the Black College Football Hall of Fame, they have like this All-State HBCU Legacy Bowl and All-Star Game
Mm-hmm.
in New Orleans every year, which, the NFL Network treats like the Senior Bowl. We do daily reports. It's a week of practices. You get exposure, all 32 teams. The NFL requires all 32 teams to be represented. So there are scouts there. There's film that goes out to databases. So the finding of players is easier. Technology has helped. There's no reason, there's no excuse. And that was the goal of Doug Williams and James Harris with a bowl like this, James Shaq Harris, is to make sure there's no excuses why these kids get overlooked. So you don't see a lot of HBCU kids this year. Carson Vincent, an offensive tackle out of Alabama A&M, got drafted in the 5th round by the Ravens. You don't see too many of them get overlooked in terms of draft or signed as undrafted players. Majority of them go as undrafted players, but that's small schools.
Yep.
You will see, I think last year in 2024, only 11 players from non-FBS schools got drafted. Because the league's like, well, these kids are hungry. We'll just sign them as undrafted free agents instead of using our draft capital on them, which is kind of a jacked up way to look at it, but is what it is. As long as there's an opportunity, as the great Eddie Robinson said, that's all players can ask for. Then they have to prove themselves, just like we were talking about earlier with employment. You see, if you get that door cracked open a little, that's where you have to prove yourself. You know, it's stupid for people just to hire you if you're not any good, just because you look a certain way or you come from a certain institution. Right? You got to prove yourself. So that's an important part of this as well.
Like I told a former guest on the show recently when he signed his undrafted free agent invitation to the New York Giants camp, Irv Mulligan out of Jackson State. They left the door open. Let's go kick that bitch down. I'm super proud of him. Represented by one of our mutual friends, Rashida Liberty.
Yeah.
I would be remiss not to talk about her.
She's
female-owned, Black-owned, phenomenal individual. Representing, she goes out of her way to represent HBCU athletes. And I think the last bit I want to touch on HBCU is like, you answered it beautifully. Thank you for that answer. But recently, Robert McDaniel and Irv Mulligan, both out of Jackson State, national champions. Robert McDaniel, phenomenal year. One of the best players in the HBCU football world.
Oh, and FCS.
Yes. And Irv Mulligan broke Walter Payton's record, which is like, how is this not talked about by everyone all year long? Phenomenal seasons, yet overlooked outside of Legacy Bowl week, and then out of you are a huge proponent. Like, unless you are talking about it, I hardly ever hear HBCU players talked about prominently. It's I almost have like a rhetorical question, almost out of frustration from me meeting these gentlemen and knowing them. What more do they need to do to get drafted? Like, phenomenal years. Like, what more do we have to do to get them on teams?
I mean, a guy like Robert McDaniel, who got picked up by the Commanders, the Commanders were seriously thinking about drafting him.
Yeah.
But they only had, I think, 5 draft picks. I mean, they really wanted him. I spoke with some people there, like, what do you think about him? Like, we loved him. We were going to draft him, but we were able to get him.
Mm.
Irv's a running back. There's 1 million running backs in this year's draft. He's got to go prove himself. But he's a dynamic talent. Like you said, he rushed for almost 1,300 yards in just 10 games, carrying it 18 times a game. That's it. Jackson State's got some dudes down there. Look, there's a lot of good players. You have Joaquin Davis, the 6'4" wide receiver out of North Carolina Central, who came down to the Legacy Bowl and busted a 4.4 40, and everyone's like, what's this dude 6'4" doing? Wide receiver running. And then they go back and look at his film, and they see he's a great special teams player at North Carolina Central. Like, okay, we got to get him into our camp. So the Broncos immediately were like, okay, because he didn't have tremendous production at North Carolina Central because they ran the football a lot, right? And so, like, there's a lot of really good, Elijah Williams is the MEAC Defensive Player of the Year, defensive tackle out of Morgan State. So there's a lot of these players who get into camps and who make rosters. Special teams, of course, is a way, but we've seen some other guys step up and do their thing. So it's about the opportunity. It's about a team having patience, because a lot of these programs don't have nutrition programs. These HBCU schools, they don't have weight rooms. I mean, Hampton's weight room is not going to be what George's weight room is.
Yeah.
Right. It's just they don't have the budget for it. They don't put the emphasis on it. And so that's something that has to go. And in terms of like people, media and stuff not talking about it, well, I'm one of the few people who went to an HBCU who's in the media. Other people, whether they're black or whatever, went to Michigan. They went to Syracuse. They don't talk. They don't care. They don't think about it. It's not in the consciousness. Which, again, it's why it's important to me to be on that megaphone, that bullhorn, waving the flag for these guys. I consider myself an ambassador for an important part of Americana, and that's the historically black colleges and universities.
And enough can't be said. Like I can't wait for you to just be more prominently featured in just everything sports media across the board. Because the work that you do, the outspokenness you are for the worldview that you believe in, the people that you fight for, that's why I was like very nervous having you on. Because I'm like, man, the amount of legwork you do behind the scenes for everything you talk about is phenomenal, is second to none.
Well,
Um,
I appreciate
yeah,
it.
no, absolutely. Like I said, I don't want to take your entire morning. I usually like to end these conversations. Thank you for your time, by the way. With a non-football question whatsoever. Do you have any conspiracy theories you believe in? Like not like weird government stuff, but just Robert McDaniel mentioned he actually believes in Bigfoot, and we had a conversation about
Oh
that. So
my
do you?
God, Rob, you got to be kidding me. No, I
Hey,
do not believe in
he said in
Bigfoot.
the A gap he could take down Bigfoot. So what about you? What do you believe in?
And 100 men could beat a big silverback gorilla, right? No, I'm not. I am not a conspiracy theorist. I deal in facts. I do not have. I don't know. I'm kind of wondering though about the silverback and 100 dudes.
Yeah, what
It's
do you
funny. I
think?
put something out there like on Twitter the other day. Like, here are my 10 guys, and I realized like people came to like 1,000 other guys I should put on there, like Charles Haley and Larry Allen and John Lynch and guys like that. But no, I'm not a big conspiracy theorist. I am a big true crime guy. Like, I like sports podcasts, but I live in the true crime podcast space like fanatically. I probably go through two
Oh,
or three a week when I'm working out.
what do you
Um,
listen to? Who do you listen to?
well, there's a series of great podcasts called Smokescreen, and it varies everything from political corruption to missing people to cold cases. A lot of the stuff on the Wondery app. A lot of it seems like half the stuff is somewhere down in Florida. But a lot of these are like cold cases, like people who are wrongly imprisoned or people who are rightfully imprisoned, and the damages it does to the re-victimization of families. Like, there's a whole broad
Mm.
scope of things going on here, but I'm just fascinated because a lot of it, comes down to like a lot of lazy work. Like, a lot of people like, okay, this is the husband, so he did it, so we're not going to look at anybody else, or we didn't look at this, or we've got DNA now, but we're not going to allow it to be introduced into the courts, so people have to rot in jail forever. I mean, a lot of different things, man. I'm really really into the true crime. I'm telling you, I live this stuff. I love it. Like right now, what's the one I'm listening to? It's like super dope. Let me call it up right now. It's the well, I listened to the Betrayal. Those are good. Bone Valley. Bone Valley. That's a good one. Bone Valley. Make sure you
Interesting.
listen to that one. And Scamanda is the best. They've already done a show on Scamanda.
Okay, you guys
And
heard it here
The
first.
Bakersfield 3 is actually coming out with a show, I think, on Max this week, too. That's another great one.
True crime. I did not take you for a true crime
Good
guy. I
stuff.
think I'm the only one holding out. Like I refuse to. Like
Uh,
I think I'm gonna have to take your recommendation. I think you're the pushing factor that's gonna get me
there
into
we
true
go.
crime.
True and
What's
political.
as we head out here, what's next for Steve? What's the big thing right now in the off season that we need to look forward to
Yeah,
seeing
well,
you more on screen?
this is kind of May and June where I do a lot of the events you're talking about. I do a lot of foundation work where I'll MC some stuff at Patrick Mahomes Foundation. I'll do the Black College Football Hall of Fame induction ceremony in June. I work with a couple other things I can't really discuss publicly that I'll be doing stuff like that. But then we got the schedule release coming out May 14th, so everyone can figure out which hotels and where they're going to travel to and who's playing on Christmas Day and things like that. Mini camps, obviously, we'll be at some mini camps coming up at the end of May, early June. And
Hmm.
then, look, before you know it, man, the Pro Football Hall of Fame, the game is like July 28th or 29th. The
Can't
Chargers
wait.
and Lions. So that we'll be right there, man. It happens quickly.
Well, sir, Steve, I'm going to let you go. You have important football business to attend to. The fact that you've spent this amount of time with us this morning, we're honored. Thank you so much. Stick around after. We'll chat for a minute or two before I let you go. And yeah, thank you. I appreciate you.
Thanks for having me, Pierce. Well done.